أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أنزلنا إليك الكتاب بالحق لتحكم بين الناس بما أراك الله ولا تكن للخائنين خصيما واستغفر الله إن الله كان غفورا رحيما ولا تجادل عن الذين يختانون أنفسهم إن الله لا يحب من كان خوانا أثيما. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا مولانا محمد عليه وعلى آله أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم. In the beautiful surah of An-Nisa, verses 105, in the 5th juz, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala discusses this concept of justice. And behind these beautiful ayat that were just recited, there's a beautiful story involving the Prophet Muhammad and involving a difficult struggle that almost tore the Muslim community apart completely. Remember that when the Prophet Muhammad arrived in Medina, or Yathrib as it was known at the time, there was already existing tension between the Aus and the Khazraj, which were the two main clans or groups in Medina, aside to other groups that existed at the time, including the Jewish tribes. But those two main clans of Aus and Khazraj were fighting and warring with each other. So the Prophet Muhammad in the first few years of his time in Medina was trying to mediate between them and reduce the tension and trying to get them to understand this concept of brotherhood and this concept of love. And so the tension arose actually after one of the battles. The Prophet Muhammad there was a shield, and he gave it as a gift to one of the people from the Aus. And this person was very poor. His name was Nu'man. And Nu'man deserved the shield, and the Prophet Muhammad found sincerity in him, so he gave him the shield. Now when Nu'man took it, he said, you know what, I'm going to sell it, so I'm going to store it in my house for a while, and then afterwards I'm going to go to the market and try to sell it, inshallah. So while storing it and while this whole incident was transitioning and happening, there was one individual who watched all of this unfold. This individual, if you look at the narrations, his name is either basically Tu'ma or his name is Bashir, but nonetheless, let's call him Bashir for the time. He saw the Prophet Muhammad choosing Nu'man to get the shield, and so he was very jealous. And he said to himself, why does the Prophet Muhammad give him and not me? And so out of his jealousy, he decided to steal the shield. So he actually jumped over the houses at night, decided to go when nobody else was pretty much focusing, and tried to rob the shield and exit, subhanAllah, without nobody noticing. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willed for people and witnesses to see this incident. And so people complained to him and told him, listen Bashir, we've seen you do it, just take responsibility and just give it back. There's no need for tension, especially because you are from the Khazraj and the person he stole it from is from the Aus. He says, what are you talking about? When he got very arrogant and very egoistic, and he said, no, we have no reason or no proof, and he got very arrogant. So he decided actually to keep the shield, until the Prophet Muhammad the news reached the Prophet Muhammad. So he sent people to investigate. So Bashir, not wanting to fall into basically being caught in a state of theft and not wanting the whole stigma attached to a thief, he decided to not take responsibility, but rather blame somebody else, blame a Jewish man in the city of Yathrib. So he took the shield and actually climbed over and he went to this person's house. His name is Zayd ibn Samir, and he basically put the shield in the house of Zayd ibn Samir without Zayd actually noticing. And when the Prophet Muhammad sent investigators to find out, especially now that a person from the Aus and the Khazraj are being, subhanAllah, mentioned in a state of conflict, the Prophet Muhammad sent investigators. The investigator went and talked to Bashir. Bashir told him, what are you talking about? I'm an innocent man, I'm a Muslim guy, I don't steal. How can you accuse me of anything like this? And he said, you know what, go and check the Jewish man's house. I know him to be a man of theft, and people will confirm this. And he basically made up this whole, subhanAllah, story to convince the investigators to go check the Jewish man's house. After getting a search warrant, they went to the Jewish man's house and they found the shield in his house. And so the news came back to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Based on the evidence, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ ordered for the arrest of the Jewish man, and ordered, subhanAllah, or actually got on top of the mimbar at Maghrib or Isha Salah, and he basically delivered an important speech about the importance of unity, because he was under the impression that the tension or the whole story was made up so that the Aus and the Khazraj would fight each other and tension would arise between them, when it was actually the Jewish man who stole all along. And so he actually, subhanAllah, went out and delivered this speech. And wrongfully, the Jewish man was arrested, and Bashir was again let go. And he went to sleep thinking everything is okay, thinking nobody's ever going to find out. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always watchful. And right before Salat al-Fajr, wahy or revelation came to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and these are the ayat that we recited, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, Ya Rasulullah, inna anzalna ilayka al-kitaba bil-haq. We gave you the book in truth, so you can judge and rule between people in truth. And you should never be a backbone or a supporter for those who are, again, betraying the trust and lying and coming up with concoctions and lies to blame other people. So the Quran, I invite you to read the words and the whole, subhanAllah, ayat on your own. But the Prophet Muhammad is told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Astaghfirillah, and continues the ayat, say, you know what, don't, وَلَا تُجَادِلْ عَنِ الَّذِينَ يَخْتَنُونَ أَنفُسَهُم, don't come and try to defend those who lie and betray themselves. And the ayat beautifully discuss the importance, subhanAllah, of honesty, the importance of integrity and genuine sincerity, and the importance of not being, subhanAllah, in a state of lies or in a state of hypocrisy. Interestingly, a few things to wrap up, inshallah. One, this Jewish man never accepted Islam, and when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ received the ayat, his innocence was proven. And imagine the Quran proves the innocence of a Jewish man that never accepted Islam. This goes to teach us that it doesn't matter what the other person's faith is. It doesn't matter if the person is even of no faith. You have a responsibility as a Muslim to be sincere. You have a responsibility to be honest. Not for the sake of the other person, but for the sake of your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And many people sometimes will say, you know, I'm going to be nice to this person or that person just so I can give them da'wah and so they can become Muslim. You're doing it because it's a responsibility between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's the most important part. Whether they accept Islam or not, that's secondary, and it's a blessing and guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He chooses to whom He gives, mashallah. And importantly, this whole concept of justice, it goes to show you, and there's many aspects of justice in the surah of An-Nisa, and the scholars will tell you, importantly, that the reason why justice is mentioned throughout, subhanAllah, Surah An-Nisa, because it's very important to be just to our women. At the same time, the justice that we give to women, if we maintain that justice with women, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us the ability to remain just throughout all our lives. JazakumAllah khair, barakallahu feekum, and may Allah grant you an understanding of Surah An-Nisa throughout Ramadan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.